begin joint training for a potential showdown with Aidid.
Once I get to Fort Bragg, then I got a better understanding of what the actual mission statement was.
UN food shipments were getting hit, and basically the guy responsible for it was Aidid.
Our objective there was to go and capture Mohammed Farah Aidid and also dismantle as much of his key infrastructure as possible.
Training alongside the Special Forces is America's premier combat team, a top-secret unit known as Delta Force.
A unit that's so secret the Army doesn't acknowledge its existence.
I'm not really sure what I'm allowed to say about them, actually.
The existence of Delta is neither confirmed or denied by the American government.
As a former Delta operator, Wayne Long was well aware of the capabilities of Delta Force.
It is a force which is given special operations tasks over and above Special Forces, over and above the Rangers.
Lee Van Arsdale spent 11 years as one of America's secret warriors.
We have a group of individuals, fairly small by military standards, that are specially selected and trained to do the jobs they do. Going much beyond that, I'm going to go into classified territory, which we won't do.
What they specialize in is targeting individuals and finding them and arresting them.
They're really absolutely the best shooters and assaulters in the world, bar none.
To support the Delta mission, the U.S. turns to a select unit of Army combat helicopter pilots.
The Night Stalkers are the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and they are the hottest helicopter pilots in the world.
Night Stalker pilot Mike Durant is a veteran of global combat missions.
And this was considered what's called a low-intensity conflict. We're not going against the Iraqi integrated air defense system. We're going against basically individuals with weapons, whatever they can carry or put on a vehicle.
As Task Force Ranger trains in America, Aidid rallies the city of Mogadishu in opposition to the UN peacekeeping mission.
Well, the average Somali doesn't read the New York Times every day and doesn't watch CNN. They know what they're told, for the most part. And Aidid was a fairly sophisticated propaganda master. The broadcast from the radio station would tell people that the Americans were in Mogadishu to force everyone to convert to Christianity, to steal their firstborn children, whatever. But it didn't take a lot to add to the general hostility about what was going on, a fear that the Americans were here to really do serious harm to people of that city. His real conflict with the UN came to a head on June 5th of 1993 when UN forces went and did a surprise inspection of the Aidid clan's radio station, which prompted a kind of spontaneous uprising, which led to 24 Pakistani soldiers being killed as part of this patrol, and their bodies were mutilated.
At that point, the Security Council passed a resolution saying get those responsible. Admiral Howe, the Secretary General, Special Representative, posted a notice saying $25,000 reward for Aidid. From then on, it was get Aidid.
Well, this was regarded as an insult by the Somalis, who promptly put a $250,000 bounty on the head of Animal Howe, as they called him.
Admiral Howe requests the deployment of Delta to apprehend Aidid.
So help me God.
Though the request is turned down by the new Clinton administration, Task Force Ranger continues to prepare for a showdown with Aidid.
We received a lot of information before deploying to Somalia about specifically the fighters in the country, those people that would be behind the weapons pulling a trigger.
Mogadishu has become one of the great arms markets of East Africa.
If it launched a bullet or exploded, they had it in Somalia.
The heavily armed militias of Somalia are known as the Morian.
Morian are young Somali gunmen who basically are recruited from refugee camps and from the countryside, who have really nothing to do and no way to make a living.
These were generally young men who were recruited and trained by the drug market in Somalia. The drug of the country was a drug that was referred to as COT. Generally, the warlords controlled the drug going into the city. And the warlords handed the drug out free to anybody who would be willing to handle a gun. And so the fighters in the city were men that were paid for by drugs. It was a drug much along the lines of cocaine, and it gave the soldiers there a bit of courage that they wouldn't have had without the drug. They would use the drug, and then about an hour or two later, the drug would hit full potency, and they would become very aggressive.
They cruise around in technicals, they're heavily armed, and they're ready to fight against each other, or in this case, against Americans at a moment's notice.
By late summer of 1993, the Morion begin directly targeting American soldiers who are part of the UN peacekeeping force.
Americans are being killed, 2 here, 2 there.
On August 8th, Aidid's Morion target a U.S. Army vehicle with a command-detonated mine. 4 American soldiers are killed. In the first military decision of his administration, President Clinton orders the immediate deployment of Task Force Ranger to Somalia.
We were left with no other option as a nation trying to take the lead in Somalia, but to deploy our troops there and our cutting-edge troops, the best people we had to actually track down a single man in a city of 1 million people and bring him in. And we were going to get him.
When a 1993 attack on UN peacekeepers by Somali warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid kills 4 American soldiers, President Clinton authorizes the deployment of special forces to Somalia.
In late August of 1993, Task Force Ranger, which was made up of Delta Force and these Rangers, arrived in Mogadishu.
Under the command of General William Garrison, Task Force Ranger occupies the old Mogadishu airport, just south of the city. Unlike the Marines who preceded them, this is not a humanitarian mission.
The mission was to apprehend Mohammed Farah Aidid. It had nothing to do with feeding people or distributing rice or anything else.
Even the veteran soldiers are shocked by what they see in Mogadishu.
Everyone's armed, everyone's got some RPGs. Frankly, going out and getting in firefights in the street is something that they all do, so they're remarkable fighters. I mean, they've been doing it for generations now, and it's almost like it's their national pastime. You compare them to some of the other places in the world you go, and people can't wait to throw their arms in the air, but Somalis have no quit in them. They almost live to fight, and that's women and children as well.
They conducted over the month of September 6 different raids out in the city. Initially, they had some problems.
You can't go out and do a tiger hunt and beat the bush and drive them out to you, especially when you're talking about a very powerful warlord in his own backyard.
In the city of Mogadishu, they had Somali spies, sort of traditional human intelligence.
When Aidid became a wanted man by the UN, of course they couldn't find him.
Inadvertently, they arrested 9 UN workers who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So there were embarrassing missteps, but they also began to have successes toward the end of September. They raided a convoy of cars and arrested Osman Otto, who was Aidid's chief financier and sort of weapons purchaser. And it sort of confirmed that their intelligence and their tactics were finally paying off. And of course, there was a tremendous amount of resentment. Imagine if some foreign power, swooped into your little suburban neighborhood of Denver or Baltimore or Washington and at gunpoint started arresting your community leaders. In short order, everybody who had a rifle would be in the streets to shoot at them when they came down, which is precisely what happened in Mogadishu.
When Americans first came, they were very popular. Everybody, and I mean everybody, was very supportive of them.
People decided to kill any American or any United Nations officer because we believed that when Aidid was killed, the rest of Somalia would be killed.
When we very first got there, it didn't seem like they were the enemy. That's an accurate term in this case. They became the enemy for us.
Months before Task Force Ranger arrived in Mogadishu, an event had occurred that helped Aidid galvanize Somali hostilities toward the American forces. the UN received word of a large Somali gathering at the compound of Abdi Quibdid.
Abdi Quibdid was a political advisor to